Serious drug dealers of Reddit. Have you ever called CPS on a client? If so, what's the story? Former dealer here. It's been many years now, but I sold crack, heroin, pills, cocaine as a teenager. I once had a lady come in the trap house with a newborn. She was literally selling herself and or her baby for a few rocks. When I saw the newborn in shitty diapers and dirty as fuck, I knew I had to give her a few rocks. I'll let her smoke and leave. I also called BCW, Bureau of Children's Welfare, on her as soon as she walked out. She lived on my street. I couldn't let her try to sell her baby. I couldn't let her keep it either. I just couldn't call the police. The baby was in a foster home less than a week later. The lady disappeared shortly after. I never saw her again. I hope she never got the baby back. She was a real piece of shit. When I was selling to her, a lady shook her crying baby in front of me. I wigged out, took the baby, dumped $500 worth of cocaine and heroin, and called 911 from my car. She didn't put up a fight until the cops came to arrest her. She tried to sue me for kidnapping. Definitely not the best strategy for me. I was 18 and addicted pretty bad, but when the baby saw a doctor under state care, he was covered in bruises, a couple of burns, and had 2 broken ribs already. I'm convinced she would have killed him. He's 10 now and happy and thriving. The whole experience and legal battle when she tried to have me charged with kidnapping is how I got sober. I used to deal way back when I was a hot mess in an extremely abusive relationship. I called CPS on not only one person, but 6. The one that sticks with me most though, not only because of the severity, but because I called twice, was this couple who used to pick up from me at a laundromat, and we ended up seeing each other often enough I felt okay to go to their place. I was so fucking floored when I stepped through that door. I kid you not. They had taken up all the carpeting in the house and had torn down the walls to get at the copper wiring and pipes. They had no electricity or running water. There was nothing in that house except for some sleeping bags in what used to be the living room. And then I noticed a nest of blankets with bright blue eyes peering at me over the pile, and realized that there was a toddler and a small child no more than 5. Until this point, I had never seen nor heard them talk about having kids. The poor kids were filthy and obviously malnourished. The house stunk of meth so badly I gagged. I couldn't believe it. I guess the look of shock was super apparent on my face because the dad said they were squatting and introduced me to their kids. I made some small talk and then left. The phone was ringing for CPS. Before I closed my car door, I gave them the address and let them know the conditions of the home, and they were squatting with 2 small children. Gave the names of the parents as I knew them and the names of the kids. They ended up going to jail for the squatting and the kids went to live with a relative. They ended up contacting me back to sell to them after they were bailed out of jail and I never responded. However, the guy I was with at the time ended up selling to them and they were living in a field in a tent with the kids. I got into a huge fight with my boyfriend over it and was so disgusted he still sold to them. I ended up calling CPS on them again. From what I heard from other people that knew them, the kids were taken permanently after that, and about a year later the mom ended up going to prison for attempted murder and the dad went to prison for check fraud some weeks after that. Edit. I should have mentioned that I sold weed, shrooms, X and acid. Yes, back when I was younger, maybe 17, I got my first job at Domino's Pizza. One of my managers was a really scummy 24-year-old guy that looked like a troll, had astoundingly bad hygiene, and also a shitty attitude, but sold good weed and bought me cigarettes. This was my first experience having older friends able to get me good stuff on demand like that. One day he hooked me up with a friend of his that was selling mushrooms. So I met with that guy and bought an ounce, and then walked to my manager's house to sell him some and also get some weed. So turns out him and his similarly aged sister, who has a 1-year-old baby, both live in makeshift bedsheet bedrooms in the basement of the tiny house. They smoked inside, windows closed, cats everywhere, bugs everywhere, weird gross sour smells coming from all areas. Everything gross. Their mom was home, but she was senile and addicted to painkillers, as well as the sister. So we did the trade downstairs, and when I go back upstairs I go to the kitchen to throw some stuff away, and I see the baby in a high chair, eating a pack of cigarettes. He's just sitting there tearing them open, and putting in his mouth, and spitting it out. I ran downstairs, and told the sister and she just started yelling mom. Mom get the baby, a couple times lazily, then gives up, and goes back to just sitting there. It was surreal. I hadn't ever experienced such neglect and disgust from people. I left and waited 2 days to call CPS, because I didn't want my manager to know it was me who called. I know the kids got taken away, and she went to live with a different family member. Or at least that's what I was told. I'm not a dealer, but I called CPS on my sister. She smoked a lot of pot, not a huge deal, but one day, when I was picking them up to come to my house, she was on the floor smoking a bowl with him right next to her. She also told my husband there was meth in the house and her boyfriend was on acid. They also fought constantly, and I know it got physical. There was a time he threatened her and said if you weren't holding him, I'd beat the shit out of you. She always complained that he never slept. But the first night he was at my house he fell asleep with no issue and did perfectly all week long. For the first 17 weeks of her pregnancy she was high and told the doctor so it's frustrating that she got past that. She called me one day because they had been by the do a wellness check, so I went to pick the baby up, 8mo old. The house was fucking disgusting. I had never seen anything like it. There were piles of trash bags filled with diapers and rotting food. Counters were covered. The floors when I sat down felt nasty. The baby was in only a diaper, normal for his age, but all of his clothes were dirty. She packed a bag for him to stay the night with me. He had multiple patches of ringworm, one the size of a quarter, and his bag, clothes, and car seat were filled with cockroaches. My husband swears up and down he found bed bugs in the baby's car seat. We threw the car seat away and washed all of his clothes, and then went and bought him a new car seat, bought one for my house, and new one for her. We had the baby for a week and CPS never showed back up, so she asked for him back. We didn't have any signed statement saying she gave us permission to take him, so we were worried if we said no she'd try and get us for kidnapping, so we gave him back. We took her to Walmart to buy soap, her car seat, and meds for the ringworm. The next day I called CPS and filed as a mandated reporter and told them everything I knew. It's been 3 weeks and nothing has come out of it. I talked to my sister a little while ago and asked about the ringworm. She said it's still there and that the doctors say there's nothing they can do, which I know is bullshit. It broke my heart to call, but I had to. It kills me knowing he's in that house and I feel helpless. There's nothing else I can do. It's hard enough. My husband and I have our own 5-month-old baby, but I would take that little boy in a heartbeat, because at least I know he'd be in a clean, safe house with people to take care of him. He doesn't deserve that. Thank you to everyone who stood up for the children. I want to share my story. Being on the opposite side of you/many B's question. I was a user whose dealer called CPS on them. Many years ago me and my partner were addicted to opiates. We had a steady dealer for a while and eventually my partner was able to start selling after finding a new source. Well, our old dealer didn't like losing business, so he hit us where it would hurt the most. Our child. He had called and made up some bogus claims. When the police came it was just me and the child and the place was clean and had food. I got them to leave, but CPS showed up a couple hours later. The truth is we were full on functioning addicts who wanted freedom, but didn't know where to seek it. We followed the requests of CPS and the drug court exactly how they asked, and with no setbacks. Both have completed 3 months of residential and 3 months of outpatient treatment, and were back home with our child in time for the holidays. We have been sober since 2012. The reason I want to share this is to give thanks for those of you who have had to make that call. Not only did my child get a chance at a good life, our whole family did. Real short and simple. Yes, a friend of my girlfriend introduced us to her neighbors who were like 50 to 60-year-old hippies that looked like a bad acid trip but bought weed regularly for full price. Couple months down the road they start being more friendly with my girlfriend and I and start talking more when we'd go drop off the shit. The topic began with her telling us how she has custody of her daughter's oldest born because her daughter was sitting time at a women's prison. Backstory on the kid: looks 15 but clearly has the mind capacity of a 6 or 7-year-old. Not sure what was wrong with her specifically, but you could tell there were issues. Near the end of the conversation about her daughter, she brought up the fact that her granddaughter was prescribed Adderall 30XR, and whenever they got her prescription they'd dump all the little beads into a bowl to use whenever they couldn't find meth or whatever they needed, and instead fill the Adderall with Benadryl to make the kid sleep. Till this day I'll never forget the emotions I felt after getting out of there and sitting in my car. My hands were shaking so bad it was hard to Google information about CPS, much less type information in. I felt goosebumps in every pore of my scalp. As a father of 2, I never knew such evil existed. Obviously in movies and shit, but never experienced something firsthand like that. One of my friends used children's medicine to make her daughter sleep whenever she didn't want to deal with her. When the grandma took the baby in, there was a few months where she cried a lot. She was going through withdrawals because her mother had been giving her this pain medication for so long. This is heartbreaking. You didn't quite say, but I hope the grandma persevered through the crying until the child made it past the withdrawals. I don't know if there's any increased risk of that child being more likely to become addicted to other drugs in the future, but I hope not. My coworker adopted a baby who was addicted to drugs at birth. To help with the withdrawal symptoms, the newborn was on morphine for a bit in the NICU and closely monitored obviously. She's in 1st grade and even Tylenol for like fever reducing during a normal cold can be addictive for her, and she'll keep asking for more. Her mom says no until next dose is needed, but she says with anything she needs to be super diligent about her daughter's usage, and I guess it's common in babies that were addicted from what she's told me. My time has come. I was around 15 to 16 in high school selling mostly acid and ecstasy. I was doing it to save up money for a car and in the future, college. There was this one girl I would never sell to because she was pregnant. She was one of those girls that got pregnant with an older dude and he left the picture. She didn't want the baby, but her parents made her keep it. Finally, not long after she gave birth, she was trying to buy some ecstasy. She was in my car and I was giving her I think around 2 or 3 pills. That's around $40, $55 and she says, I'm going to be honest, I don't have money, but I know you have a girlfriend you really love, so I was thinking about giving you my baby. I didn't say anything for a little. I couldn't tell if she was serious. Then after a long pause I told her to get out of my car. Later in the day I had my parents call CPS for obvious reasons. I came up with a story that me and the girl were friends and that she was telling me how she would trade the baby for drugs. I'm not sure, but I think the baby ended up going with a family member and is living a completely normal life. This is a sad story, but I'll tell it anyways because it was the past. There have been so many stories, but this one takes the cake. It's the reason I stopped selling and turned my life around. I must have been 16 or 17 at the time. I was in high school, also had a part-time job at Dairy Queen, and on top school and regular job. I was selling crack and heroin. I was also selling weed and cigarettes at school. This story involves a heroin and crack user. At the time of this incident, I've already been selling hard for about 1 or 2 years. Profit was pretty good. I'd say around $300 per day on average, which was great for my age, but I spent money as fast as it came. I was young and I was dumb. So as a DD selling rock, crack, and pants, heroin, I would use some addict's house to sell out of. I guess the cops would call these things crack shacks or projects. I'd be supplying the addict a cheaper price for product so that I could use their house to sell out of. They would also refer a lot of other people to buy from me, and or they would help sell for me in return for product. So the incident is in this addict's house. He, about 50-year-old man, has a girlfriend slash partner or something like that. The girlfriend had a little boy, maybe the age of 3/4/5. At the time I didn't know how to tell how old a kid was. I didn't ask either because I was ashamed of myself for not preventing his mother from using. This kid though, I felt like he was my little brother in some way. I would cook for him when he was hungry and his mom was always too messed up to do anything. One day, I go to work at the shack. It was a regular day. I get into the house, get my products ready, weigh out the stuff and bag them up. Knock on the bedroom door of the guy, homeowner. I see him sleeping. His girlfriend is also on the couch sleeping because she is always high and messed up. The kid is just sitting there watching TV. I make him some macaroni and cheese. Now I gotta wake up the guy because I need an update on what products he's moved the day before. So I go in his room. I see his eyes were still open. White foam all over him like has overdosed. It's normal for me to see overdoses, but this was beyond an overdose. He's been overdosed for too long, which means he's dead. He was probably overdosed for at least 10 hours because I could smell it, and he was cold to the touch. His vomit was dried and his eyes were dried. Now I'm in one of the biggest panics I've ever been in. As I'm trying to figure out what to do, I sit down with the kid and stay there until he finishes his mac and cheese, thinking about what I'm going to do next. His mom, sleeping behind me on the couch, is still alive, but has no idea what had happened. Or maybe she does. I don't know. I left the shack, drove about 2 blocks away, used the prepaid cell phone. I have to call the police and report it. Sat in my car until the police showed up. From that day on, I'm anti-hard drugs. I still wonder about the little kid. He's probably 16 now without a mom. Every time I see the mac and cheese at the supermarket, I get this fucked up feeling in my gut. And for the guy that died, I know I didn't kill him. I've accepted that. But could he have lived longer if I was never in his life? His life story was pretty amazing. He did cool things when he was young. He got into drugs when his mom passed away. He didn't have a dad though. One tip for anyone reading this: never judge a person on where they are in life. Even if they are crackheads, as many people would say. Some people go through the most brutal situations and have no love and support to get on their feet. I'm glad I was able to be the man's friend before he died, and I know I treated the kid as a big brother/father, and I hope he remembers that part. Back in college, I went over to a single mother's house to drop off some bud. The kid was 3 years old. I walk in and notice it is extremely smoky, and I immediately have a hard time breathing. It smelled like rotten shit, trash, and cigarettes. I was there for about 3 minutes and went to use the bathroom, where I noticed fresh and dried blood on the toilet and shit smeared all over the floors and up the walls. The shit was old and hardened, and dead bugs were in the corners of the bathroom and piled on top of the fesses. But that isn't the only icing on the cake. Once I left the bathroom, I went back out to the living room area and saw a big ass rat run right across the floor. Looked like he came right out of Ratatouille. Then the mother asked me if I wanted to take opioids. So I got the fuck out of the house and called CPS. I was selling a variety of drugs a few years ago. I had one friend. Let's call him Chris. He stayed at his F-head uncle's house with his uncle. His name's Rick. Fuck him, I'll use his real name. His cousin. And his cousin's kids. Around 4 to 6. I hated going to this house because all they did was cook meth inside. Literally feet away from these children. These kids lacked clothes. They barely ate. I'm pretty sure they were never enrolled in school either. Well, eventually I get fed up and decide to make a call to CPS. They go in, and what they found was horrifying. The Uncle Rick had a hard drive with thousands of naked photos of the children. They also found out he was prostituting the kids for meth and heroin. When I found this out, I was absolutely appalled. He's in jail, and honestly I hope he doesn't make it. I pulled up to this woman's house. I was 19 at the time. She was a regular and often asked if I had any coke. I was strictly a marijuana dealer. When I walked into her house, she had 2 babies. Twins. Female dealer here. When I asked to use the bathroom, she said she didn't have running water due to money issues. There was a 5-gallon bucket in the bathroom to pee and poop in. This bucket was extremely full, not to mention the overflowing trash cans and tied off trash bags in the living room. I couldn't believe how gross her house was. I panicked. I called CPS and told them I was a family friend. I drove my car down the road a little and waited for the cops to show up. I watched them pull the woman out to the house in cuffs. She turned out to have heroin in her house. I still wonder about those twins today. Yes, she was shooting up while driving with her 18-month-old kid in the back unbuckled. Found out she was leaving him alone for hours to go out. FYI, I sold her weed, not opiates. She threatened to stab me because I bought diapers and opened the box so she couldn't sell them. Last I checked she's still a squid and she's on her 237,567th chance with CPS. Just call CPS anonymously again for some random reason and get the kid taken away at this point. I had a dealer who I thought was alright at first. Came on a little strong asking to play Destiny with me as we both had PS4. Eventually I started going round to his house for a joint before going home with my bag. This was fine at first but gradually became a bit of a living hell. He started screaming at his kids. They must have been 3 and 6. For anything. For walking into the room. For playing in another room. For making a loud noise. For asking a question. Even when 3 want a hug he's shouting at them, and even when he gave one he told them to stop being stupid and stop crying. This abuse extended to his partner. She was half his size and thin as hell. Not unhealthy thin but thin. It was just verbal, but calling her an idiot. Screaming at her, and the slow angry tone he took with his kids. Talking through his teeth then exploding at the end of the sentence. She hated it. You could tell. But she put up with it cause she didn't work and needed to support the kids who she loved. One day he got so mad he held her against the wall and started choking her. I stood up and shouted, "What the fuck are you doing?" He caught himself and backed away. She slumped to the floor crying and he tried a pathetic attempt at damage control, telling her he's sorry but it's her fault and telling me the same. I left there and then never went back. Called social services and gave them the address. I knew they had been before, but they won't have seen it happening. Not too long after the police were there arresting him for something. I assumed that SS saw the weed or something and called them, but I'm glad they did. I feel like I should have done something sooner as the red flags began to raise, but there were unfortunately 2 things holding me back. 1. I was the only person that came round for joints, so he would know who called them, and 2. I really wanted bud. I was so bad for it. And I really spiraled knowing I was a slave to the addiction. Ultimately that helped me kick it. Been clean 4 years now. I used to sell a smorgasbord of narcotics. Mainly H. Been clean since 2014. Went to drop off to an acquaintance who phoned me. New location so I went in with caution. Trash and scum everywhere. Smell was fucking foul. Kids running around. Shit I had seen before until I focused on the aquarium. It was full of used needles. Some capped, some not. I mean this was a 55-gallon tank with no lid and it was over halfway full. Called the HS next day. I'll never forget that. I used to work at a chain restaurant about 4 years ago when I was around 21. There was a girl who started after me. Call her Ashley. Ashley and I became best friends almost immediately. She was almost 10 years older than me at the time. But you could not tell, especially by the way she acted. But at 21, that didn't really much matter to me. We used to sneak nips into work, leave work to get drunk, and try to sneak back. Drank together out of work all the time. I knew she had a son that lived on the other side of the country that the father had custody of. She gave me some story about him lying, saying she was crazy and getting her child taken away, and nothing she did could get him back because her ex was manipulative. I bought it. Eventually I found a better job, and that's about where our hanging out friendship ended. We always stayed in touch on FB. I got pregnant with my son around 23, and she had 2 daughters in that time. So we agreed to get together and let each other meet our kids. I get to her house, and I see her walking up the street towards the house without her girls. The oldest was 2, I believe, waving to me. I get out with my son and I ask her, "Where are your daughters?" "Oh, they're inside," she says. She left her baby daughters home alone, locked inside her bedroom, to walk a mile up the road to get cigs. Okay, fucked up. But I went inside anyway. Kept my son in his car seat next to me on the couch. I can tell she's absolutely wasted already. But she pours herself 2 root beer Smirnoff nips into a cup. Lets the daughters out of the room and turns the TV on for them. The house was clean. That is what really threw me off. Like, it looked like a great environment. She sits next to me on the couch and places her cup in the drink holder attached to the couch, and we just start catching up. About 10 minutes later, her daughter says she's hungry. Ashley yells, "I just fucking fed you. Watch your trolls." I was stunned. Then the little girl climbs up on the couch and grabs the cup of vodka. I say, "No honey, that's not for babies." But Ashley stops me and says, "Oh, it's fine, it will probably help her sleep better tonight," and lets her 2-year-old daughter take a sip of her 100 proof alcohol. Now I'm about to leave, getting my shoes on, and her husband comes in, who I also knew from the same restaurant where he still worked at that time. He flips. He says, "Ashley, have these girls eaten anything all day?" She said yes, she gave them grapes and cottage cheese. It was 7 PM. She had given her daughters only a few grapes and a bowl of cottage cheese all day. I was done. I called as soon as I got in my car. The father has custody of them now, I believe. He moved out of state somewhere. Thank God. Because who knows how they would have ended up. Not sure if this counts, but in the late 1990s, I used to sell reefer part-time while I was in college. One of my regular customers turned his sister onto me. She called for a delivery. No big deal. I went there one time. She had 3 little kids, like a couple toddlers and an infant. Her house was full of cockroaches. I was disgusted. I called CPS. Not because of the drugs and babies, but because of how fucking filthy that house was. It caused a lot of problems for her and her boyfriend. They were in the system for a long time. Not sure how it all turned out, but fuck that woman.